Welcome to lesson number 6. Today we're going to be talking about 7 chords. And 7 chords are used in blues, jazz, rock, and classical. It's a very versatile and common chord. Actually, there's more than one variety of these chords. So I just want to kind of introduce the whole family of these chords. At least today we're going to talk about the 4 most commonly used types of 7 chords. Now, you may have heard of intervals. You may have heard of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. So just following the C major scale there, right? 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Okay? So to construct a C major 7 chord, what we're going to do is take our C major triad, which is the 1, 3, and 5 of the C major scale, and we're going to take those 3 and we're going to add the 7th note of the scale. So now we have a 4-note chord. Pretty cool and jazzy, huh? Hip. All right. We're going to do the same thing with the G major scale. Remember the G major? Take our 1, 3, 5, G major triad, add the 7th note of the scale. Now I got a G major 7. Okay, now let's move on. We're going to talk about dominant 7 next. Dominant 7, believe it or not, is the most common. In fact, it is so common that when you look at pop music, or you look at, in particular, look at guitar parts and guitar chord progressions, usually listed at the top of popular songs, you will find that they don't even use the word dominant. They just say something like C7 to refer to C dominant 7. So let's just look at this one note difference between a C major 7 and a C dominant 7. This is C major 7. This is C7 or C dominant 7. All I did was take the 7th note and flat it. Okay? And then that's going to be true of the G major 7. To make that a G dominant 7, we're going to flat the 7, bring it down. Okay? Now, why? Why, right? Okay, so the reason why dominant is nothing more than a $10 word for 5 chord. Okay? So remember when we did this activity several lessons ago? 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord. So 5 chord in the key of C, in the C major scale, is the chord that starts with the root being note number 5 of the scale, which is G. G major chord, so G is our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dominant note of the C major scale, and that's where we want to start building the chord. The 5, so that's your 5 chord root form, okay? Now, well, can we make a 7 out of it? Well, we sure can. Okay, but there's a problem. Not worth a darn, is it? Okay, we can solve that problem. Much better. Almost screams old-time rock and roll, doesn't it? Yes. So what we did was flat that 7 so that it would fit the key of, in this case, C major. But that's going to be true of any dominant 7, right? So, if we were going to do, let's see, well, in the G scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your 5 chord is D, and you would not, let's see, so your D major 7 would be 1, 3, 5, 7 of the D scale, but you'd have to bring the 7 down to have dominant 7 that would fit the key of G major. Okay? So a lot of times that dominant 7 wants to spring us back to the 1 chord. Okay? So, very, very common. You will see sometimes in music theory the Roman numeral V or you may see the Roman V with a small 7 next to it, and that is talking about the exact same concept. That is exactly the same thing we're talking about. Dominant 7, okay? Now, moving on. Let's talk about minor 7. Minor 7 is formed, you take the natural minor scale, and you take the 1, 3, 5, 7 of the natural minor scale. Okay, so here's your A natural minor. Remember when we did this? 1, 3, 5, 7. Hip sound, huh? Cool. Okay, remember we talked about parallel major and parallel minor and how they have different key signatures? Like C major scale is going to be different flats and sharps than a C minor scale. Okay, so this is what your C minor scale looks like. C natural minor. Okay, so if we take the 1, 3, 5, 7 of that scale, that's a C minor 7 chord. Okay, C major 7 chord, C dominant 7 chord, and C minor 7. See how we just kind of progress there? We've got the scale that initially it fits the major scale, that chord, and then we're going to flat the 7, then we're going to flat the 3 as well. So those are pretty standard formats. Now I'd like to move on to one more chord, and then we're just going to start doing some examples here. We're going to talk about the diminished 7. First, let's talk about what diminished is. So here's your major, C major chord, C minor chord. We flatted the 3. Now we're going to flat the 5 to make a diminished chord, a very tense chord, right? And from there, you know, yeah, I just had to play it. Sorry. That's your cliffhanger. Beethoven loved doing the diminished 7s. So let's talk about how you construct that. Well, what we're going to do first, though, is we're going to talk about using the standard diminished, and then we'll talk about constructing diminished 7. Okay, so here's a pop progression, right? So remember how this diminished chord kind of looks like? It kind of looks like the B chord, like the C diminished kind of looks a little bit like the B. So you guessed it, that thing can be a great way to transition. You know, if you're moving from one chord to the next whole step chord, like this progression here. Chord there? Yeah, you can see it. Okay, so you get the idea. So diminished chord is useful in more than just the, the 17th century or 18th century, right? It can be used in pop music. And in particular, if you're transitioning from, say, a G to the A minor, stick that G sharp diminished in between. Cool, huh? Okay. So to make your diminished 7, you're right. It's going to look like diminished, but it's going to have another note. Okay, so the best way, just take your dominant 7 and flat the 3, 5, and 7. Okay, now you're going to say, but that's not a 7, Dan. And you're kind of right, because now we've flatted. Remember when we started out with our major 7 and then flatted it once to do dominant. And then now from dominant we flatted that 7 again a second time to do our diminished 7. So now we've in fact flatted the 7 twice and it looks more like a 6. But we keep the naming just I guess for consistency, so we know it kind of belongs to the same chord family. Okay. I just wanted to show a brief example using 7 chords. Okay, this is maybe a familiar melody or familiar song. let's just stop right on that chord. Okay, and in the music they kind of arpeggiated it, but I mean, more than likely you're going to play it with the pedal anyway, so this is going to be the not effect, okay, is these 4 notes. And notice where it says C7 right above it. So how is that a C7? Well, it has like that C major chord. Well, they just took the this note and moved it to the bottom. The B flat has been moved to the bottom. Okay? So just like we did with our C major chord where we inverted it and changed the order of notes. Remember we did that? C major is a C major is a C major as long as it has C, E, and G. Well, same is true with any 7 chord. As long as it has whatever notes belong in the chord, it's still a 7 chord. Now, moving on in this music, there's another part here. They talk about an E7. How would you do an E7? Well, let's look at your E major scale, 1, 3, 5, 7, flat, the 7. Because remember, anytime we say E7, we're really talking about dominant 7. You know, that's guitar speak for dominant 7. Okay. This is the dominant 7. You know, they really should have put a diminished. Because notice how we kind of shift that bottom note. I'll tell you what, that's as old as time. These kinds of shifts between dominant and diminished. You can do a cool ragtime effect. Okay. And finally, right at the end, just before the end of that second page there, F sharp diminished 7. Okay, so F sharp scale, take the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, flat the 7, now flat all 3, the 3, the 5, and the 7. So that 7 is effectively flatted twice. So that's your F sharp diminished 7 root form. In this case, they put the E flat on the bottom. Okay, so, excuse me. So that's what you're going to see. That's going to correspond exactly to the notes directly underneath the F sharp diminished 7 there. Okay, so I've kind of talked about the major types, and there's many, many more modifications that can be done to 7 chords. So I think this is actually going to change the way that you look at music and the way you think about it. And maybe the next time you see a guitar chord, it will actually have some sort of meaning to you, and you'll kind of be able to predict the notes. In addition, this is going to just make pop music so much easier. Maybe if you have an interest in jazz, even if you study Beethoven's music, it will make a lot more sense having this knowledge. So look forward to joining with you next time, and be sure to take the quiz. Hope you enjoyed it.